Hello.
Computer audio.
Hello. I can hear you, but I cannot see you.
Yes, and yeah, the camera's not like I have the camera. The camera is photographing on my screen.
Right.
I'm gonna eliminate some of these three launches, these previous launches. And
It's here. It says that the camera is turned off.
oh gosh, maybe it's just the button on here. It shows a green light. I have you live. I'm going to take off my, and in the background, I have, it's photographing on my camera, shows an image here on my computer screen.
Right. And it should.
What I'm going to do is replug it in.
Okay. So for our thousands and millions of followers who are now watching, just bear with us, please.
Okay, there, I know it's the image is here on my screen.
Well, you're not sharing it.
And start video. I want to start Microsoft Live Cam.
Look at the on the left side corner, on the lower left side, on Zoom,
Yeah.
There's a mute and stop video, and there should be like a start video.
That's right. Now it's crossed. It's definitely, I'm going to do Alt V. Let's try that.
There you are. Okay, you're live. Yeah. There you are. Oh my God. So what was the issue at first with the link?
If part of it actually may be a matter of being fashionably late. I took my time, and I believe so did my computer. The
okay. Internet. So here we are.
Yeah, thank heaven. Happy to be here for a new book chat today.
Yeah, and let me make sure to share it on Facebook also. While I do that, would you mind introducing the story from the book Havana Brotherhood, so that we can get started? But let me just share it on Facebook first.
Yeah, today I learned that one of my stories from my collection, Havana Brotherhood, would be what we talk about today, and that is this is the Havana Brotherhood. These are stories mostly set south of the border, and based on my decade of living in residence in Mexico and Guadalajara and travels. The story we will talk about today is an exception. It's a story that is it's set in New York City. It's in the mid 80s, and it is a story that it means a lot to me. And I found that readers reflect it over time. It's a story that has moved people in different, very personal ways. And I'm so pleased to be with Patricio, who.
Oh, same here. Let me just, Grady, if you give me 1 second, I'm sharing the story with our friends on Facebook. You want to do that? Okay, here we go. Graydon Miller. There you are. Okay. So I think we are live. We are live.
We're live for another book chat today, and
yeah, our friend Juan David Castilla is not here today, but he's going to be here tomorrow when we're going to talk, keep our chat about Conan Doyle, right? But today we decided to still do a little talk about one of your, instead of talking about the great Conan Doyle, we're going to talk about the great Graydon Miller. So that's where we are.
yeah.
Right?
And I'm here being asked by the great Patricio X Maya.
Here I am, and I'm holding the your book here, right? And this book is the Havana Brotherhood that you wrote. We published a few years ago already, 2015. Can you believe that? It's been 6 years.
Yeah, 6 years. It's passed swiftly, and it's been a pleasure. The book and its stories have reached readers and students, and now through our chat, it's going to reach our friends out there.
Right. So we decided to do, like you said, well, I brought it up to you, and you kindly acquiesced to talk to me and to everybody about the short story Angels, which is in this collection of yours, Havana Brotherhood, which is a collection of, what is it, 10 stories? 1, 2, 3, 4, 11 stories, right?
Yeah.
11 stories, a lot of them plays or based in Latin America. Some of them autobiographical, some of them very inventive, and some of them highly both autobiographical and fictional at the same time. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I do think this story Angels, which is on page 63 of the book Havana Brotherhood by Graydon Miller, is both autobiographical and fictional at the same time. It's got both worlds, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like it so much, because it has a little bit of both. It has a little bit of the kind of hyperbole of fiction, right? The inventiveness of fiction, and it has that kind of grounding detail, reality of autobiography. And so let's just dive into it, and hopefully we can get to talk about many of your stories. Okay, there are so many good stories in this book. Poison Pen, right? Which is a kind of darkly kind of a very LA style of noir, right? Fitzroy, Credit, which my students at LACC and other schools love. In fact, that's an amazing story. Sexy as Hell, with Humor International Bridge, right, which has influenced me also, come to think of it. And then there's a few others, right? But today we were going to talk about Angels. Okay, so hopefully we'll get to talk about other stories soon. So let's jump into it, Graydon. Do you have the book with you by any chance?
Yes, I have it right here.
And why don't we start by you reading a couple of pages or a few paragraphs, if you don't mind, so we can get into the zone of the book, the feeling of the book.
Yeah, let's just begin. Angels. A cotton candy dusk gathered in the cavern between buildings as office workers fled their daily prisons. Wadika amid the weary herd. I wondered if I'd recognize him. After all, it had been 4 years. That's a lot of blood under the bridge. That summer he was interning at an East Side law firm. Hey, Woods, Wadika called out, recognizing me first, despite my longish hair. We met up on a teeming sidewalk, jostled on all sides by emancipated workers. After exchanging pleasantries, Wadika offered to carry my suitcase. I shouldered my backpack, and we strolled on into the East 60s and 70s. Leaves fluttered on the trees and side streets. They made a sizzling sound like eggs on a fry pan. There was a promise of coolness in the air. Wadika and I jabbered nonstop as I joked as if we bumped into each other only yesterday. A lot had happened in 4 years. I dropped out of school and left New York to see the world, i.e., work in a shoe store by day, get stoned by night. Wadika had gotten a law degree. His hairline showed the first signs of thinning, and there was the hint of crow's feet. Great moons of sweat formed in the underarms of my pinpoint Oxford cloth shirt. I wondered if Wadika could see defeat behind my smile. And so the tale
Look at the
begins.
text actually here. It's the tone, right? The tone is the first thing that strikes me as a kind of melancholy, little bit sad, kind of coming of age, right? And that's one thing. And also promising in the sense of like what's coming, right? After all, it had been 4 years since they saw each other. My first kind of question or talking point to you, besides the tone, would be I want to point out something that you have a great gift for. And I've always said that, among other things, your ability to name characters. You're a great namer of characters. And how did you come up with the name Wadika?
Well, this case is it lays bare the autobiographical roots of this, very autobiographical roots, because that was a name of a friend.
Okay.
that I knew in New York and college at Columbia, and I was reflecting that these people named it liberally in the beginning. They would have no reason to have known about the existence of this story. Like I kind of wonder what they'd think about it if they'd run into it, and we haven't been in touch.
Right.
So I just thought it's odd how
sometimes reality gives it to you on a platter, you know.
Yeah, and so there they dwell in these stories, and with very real details and locations, and
also the very real point of view. It has a very strong eye, right? First person. It's coming from a place, you know. It's not like it's the narrator, but it's also a persona, right? Like I dropped out of school and left New York to see the world. And then he drops out of school, right? Which we assume is, it doesn't say what school, right? But we assume it's in New York or Columbia, right?
Yeah, it's Columbia. Yeah.
So he drops out of school and then goes to see the world for 4 years.
Yeah, and then returns after a bus trip from Mobile, Alabama, via leaving Memphis and heading north, and a journey and a trip of rebirth.
So it's this guy Wadika who is all present, right? Omnipresent in the story, in the sense that he comes back after a 4-year detour, having dropped from Colombia, which is not a small thing, right? Why does somebody drop out, right? We don't know. I mean, in this case, and then he comes back, and then this name is there, right? This very evocative name.
Yeah, well, Wadika he's the friend actually who stayed in New York and greets the speaker, the eye of the story.
Right.
And you brought up that interesting point. Why does somebody leave New York or leave college? And that it may be a leap for survival too. I often think, gee, I'm just not sure if it wasn't something a way to escape and further my life by leaving.
Here's where your autobiography and your fiction kind of become one, right?
They definitely mesh here, and of course the obvious too is it seemed there are better ways to learn to be a writer than staying in college.
Also, there's a kind of badge of honor of dropping out or just leaving a great institution. You know, I think there's
it
something.
Will always. Yeah, that's like I having turned my back on it. I feel a bond, still a strong bond to it, and that somehow things are going to, there's going to be a kind of return.
With your fiction as a celebrated writer soon. I hope. You know, when I went to Syracuse University, I found out that Lou Reed had dropped out of Syracuse, and I thought, oh my God, that's a great sort of honor to have somebody of such stature having dropped out of your great school, right? And I had my little stint at Berkeley, but you had your long stint at Columbia.
Yeah, and that's the one I dropped, and there's a few other people in its illustrious history. Like I'm not even sure if Allen Ginsberg was ever a student, but he was around there with Kerouac and gang,
right?
And who certainly did not stay around to graduate.
Why would somebody stay around to graduate, right? I mean, I say that tongue in cheek, but certainly this character felt hungry for life, right? And the school, like you say, didn't give him what he wanted, and so he left for 4 years. And it's that coming home to the place, right?
Yeah, to the place of that past. And
with the fraternity on 13th Street.
Yeah, the fraternities remembered. The launching part of the story is the friend connected me, the speaker of the story, with an acquaintance we met at the summer fraternity, 4 years previous, and he had an apartment where I would be able to stay. However, the night of my arrival, he was inviting a girl over to his walk-up apartment,
right?
And that set me loose on the streets. And
now, let me ask you, in terms of what triggered the story, is it a kind of wanting to relive those days, live them again, or is it more of a trying to fictionalize something that's incomplete, or what is it? What's the drive behind the story?
Yeah, the drive behind the story certainly for these places and for New York, I have great fondness because in the course of writing the story, it was always in different places, from Memphis to Guadalajara to Los Angeles. I could take up the story or a piece of inspiration, maybe something I'd seen on TV or a piece of music taking me back to New York, and I
Right.
pick it up.
So,
And so
yeah.
a very pleasurable milieu. At the same time, there was a detonator, just a clear detonator, the obvious one, when something happens. And to quote Conan Doyle, the most extraordinary combinations and strangest effects come from life, which is a whole lot more daring than wildest imagination.
So
And in this
name,
case,
places, events.
yeah, it's all these things, a grounding and places and blocks and old addresses and memories. And then you get the event that launched it. And
Right. So it's about so the theme of the story is friendship also, right? Because he's coming back, he comes back to New York, he stays with Wadika, right? And then he calls his fellow friend Mike Powers, right? Or the
Mike,
hyperbolic man.
yeah, and Mike Powers is the person that I had lined up with to because I knew arriving in New York, that was the one little detail that I wouldn't be able to stay the first night, and I left a message for him, and upon arriving, he didn't answer the phone, and here's the person I was expecting to provide a place for me for this occasion. And as the calls went by, we and I started getting just a busy signal, and then I called up my number I had for his parents
Now,
back in Memphis.
Is it you, or is it the character, or is it both? That's something that we're going to be exploring, I guess, today, right?
I prefer to say in this case and I hope that that won't bother our viewers or be jarring for them. And
so you are the fictional character in the story.
Yeah, they're
or the fictional character is you.
It's the I with enhancements, certain enhancements that are fiction,
right?
And that heighten it. And to make it really short, I got a hold of his aunt was on the phone, and I said, "Hey, I'm here in New York. I've been calling up Mike, and there's no answer." And she said, first I said, "Oh, this is Mike's mom." No, it's not Mike's mom. This is Mike's aunt.
Right.
Can I speak to his mom? No, she can't come to the phone right now. Mike died.
Mm.
And
the hyperbolic man.
The hyperbolic man. And Mike had come home the very night I arrived in the city, and to a stuffy apartment, and it provoked an asthma attack that proved fatal.
Now, is that told in the story about the asthma attack? I don't remember quite.
It's I think with it, it's not reached until much later. Like we don't know for a long time what happened. What happened to Mike?
Right, and also the character doesn't know, and the reader doesn't know, because the character, the character knows that Mike is hyperbolic. In fact, that's his nickname, right? So it could be some type of game or something, right? There's that maybe there's a hope. There's hope there.
There was, yeah, that it could be some terrible kind of practical prank. And
you presented in the story as such too, right? Like,
yeah,
he doesn't know.
So this Mike had the sobriquet of hyperbolic man, because he was a spinner of legends and a great prevaricator. And
yeah, we're seeing it now on the screen, right? Among the truth-stretching feats were shaking hands with John Lennon's killer in Central Park, losing his virginity on the roof of the Ritz Hotel when an elderly aunt hauled him and his brother around Europe and North Africa, and orgiastic parties attended around Elvis's swimming pool as a teen. And I love this comment here. Maybe there's less truth than poetry in what Mike said. So it's a little bit of a kind of lifting up of the liar, you know, a kind of lift. The liar becomes the poet.
He's
the liar might be a bad accusation.
He was a wonderful. Yeah, he was full of stories, and it was and they were always funny, and they harmed no one, and
right.
they were such whoppers. And they contrasted actually with, I think, his very serious nature. He studied, and he ended up he was the most serious of like all classmates and dorm mates.
Right.
And so really he was always studying, even organic chemistry, which is something for doctors. His path was, he got into international finance, and when something real in his life happened, like getting posted in Abu Dhabi, it was just so marvelously hyperbolic that it was just hard to believe. His parents said, our son, well, Mike's in Abu Dhabi.
He was from Memphis, right?
Yeah, he's from Memphis. And so this marvelous character. And
so when the main character, I call it the character, because to me, I know it's you, but it's like this interesting kind of place where it's kind of fictional and real. So when the main character comes back to New York, he's expecting to see his friends, but 4 years in college is a long time, particularly after after you're a senior. The first 4 years after you graduate, are a long time in some ways.
Yeah, and well, in this case, because I dropped out, I left them after sophomore year. So they'd been like 2 years, I guess, 2 years graduated.
Right, but that's key, because at that point people are, trying to make way into their careers and leaving things behind. And
I feel as if the person who sets out in the world away from the institution is time. Those years are exponentially longer, maybe tinged by some nostalgia and memory, and whereas their course was much more the cliche of the Reagan booming go-go 80s.
So it was kind of enticing for them to like jump into the world of career.
It really was, yeah. There was good pay and partying, and some had cocaine, and somebody I knew had enough and ended up in Florida, like Fort Lauderdale later, said goodbye to
Florida.
I think his parents had also retired down there, and
right.
He was a very good friend, and
it's a good place to recuperate.
I do not know about the case of Mr. Wadika, if he indeed continues at a law firm in the environs of New York.
So Grady. So like the idea here is that he comes back from having been abroad or somewhere else for 4 years, but you withhold that information. You know what I mean? So he doesn't really say, as far as I know, where he's been.
There's actually, well, there's a scene early on with, I think, Juadica, they go to a bar like off of Madison Avenue, and Jed, that's the character who tells the story. Jed Woods says, you know, I was in rehab, and
Right.
you know, that's I'm just getting back in the world after that.
So okay,
And
let's see, Graydon here. Wanna just kind of, so they go to a bar right here. Let me see if I can pull it up. I'll pull it up here.
oh yeah, it's Jack. Jack's the place Pedro's.
Mm.
And
So Jed Woods would be your equivalent, correct?
that's correct, yeah. And Juadica said, "Get this man a shot of wild turkey," shouted the bartender in that voice reminiscent of Thurston Howell. "Water," I said, "make it water." Juadica's dubious brow arched, his eyes glared, and he said, "What happened to you, sport?" "Rehab," I said, studying the table's fake wood green, then studying Juadica's face for any change. "Been clean for 3 months. Knock on Formica."
Now I sense the scent of fiction around here. You know, the kind of,
Yeah, definitely so. And yeah, but I'll tell you, I will also say, like, the fiction, you take a detail and it must have its, just as a volcano must have its underground rivers of lava. When you put a detail in, it must have its emotional under bedrock, you know?
because
So,
it fits, otherwise it wouldn't fit, right?
yeah, it very definitely fit, and it definitely puts in relief the sense of loss, but a hopeful first steps of a new beginning.
So
And
so Jed Woods has changed also,
yeah,
because he doesn't drink anymore. He's reached
that's
the sort of an end. There's been an end to a kind of behavior, right? And so when he comes back to New York, he's already changed in that regard.
yeah.
And Mike is no longer there. Mike is dead, or they think it's dead. And so in a way, Wadika is the only one who's holding the thing together, right?
Yeah, and yeah, really, it's Jed, because the department too with the other acquaintance. That's not somebody who's a close like a bosom friend of Dan's. But Wadika's somebody who shared many good times, and a touch of poetry too, even.
Right.
And I
Several glasses of ice water and the lemon peel. I called Mike Powers again.
yeah, because still Jed, I in the story, the I fictional, is calling to try to establish contact, so that for the night coming ahead after his arrival, that he's got a place to spend, to sleep and to pass the night. And so in the following, just the storyline itself, there's the welcoming night. Jed does spend the first night in the apartment
Wadika's apartment, right?
Yeah, or his acquaintance apartment. It's actually not one. That's So it's with a person not so well, not a host, not so well known. And it's the next day that after a little bit of sightseeing, that the big challenge comes up. Like, what am I gonna do?
What does it feel like to go back to New York?
It feels nice. And now I haven't been.
Or what did it feel like for the character? I guess
that's because that's the most appropriate when talking about the story.
Right.
It felt it took away the attitudes of what wonderful lives these friends and cohorts, those who stayed, must be having, and it took them a bit off that pedestal created by distance. It renewed warm feelings. It brought me a new closeness to New York in the course of the story. The places that would be seen in the course of it as it unfolds.
So the story takes place in the late 80s, correct?
Yeah, it does.
And when did you write it?
I wrote it throughout I would say for like between the mid 90s to early 2000s in Los Angeles.
So
yeah,
like 10 years afterwards, something.
Yeah, gosh, like I remember in Memphis, one time we were filming something there in the late 90s, and so that was my side composition. I'd take it on. I either spend some time in the Memphis Public Library or else on set and working on this thing. And that was kind of
You wrote it in Memphis.
Yeah, I'm thinking if I think I rewrote it in Memphis. Like I took some of that inspiration of being in the place, Mike's hometown, another friend of mine too, Roy Barnes, and it fed into it. It was a good place to start putting the pieces together, and it did grow considerably over time. You know, returning back to Guadalajara, and I believe I had I still did a few touches on it, still in Los Angeles, but pretty much I arrived in California with that story finished.
Have you ever read Bright Lights, Big City?
Yes.
There's like little some hints of that here. I think because of the time, because of the Peruvian Coke, because of the kind of, there's a little bit of like the characters are fashionable, right? Even though they're kind of lost, or one of them is lost his life. Yeah.
On the gritty side, right? But there is an allure, and
right.
Yeah, and
I think they're still kind of protected by their sort of Colombia and by their cohort. You know what I mean? They're not like destitute. Like they could turn around and be total winners, in a heartbeat if they wanted to. It feels like that way. Like they're just flirting with what is it, destitution almost, but in reality they could jump back into the Ronald Reagan miracle, as it were.
Yeah, that's definitely, that's true, and I would say it's also true for Jed, I don't think Jed Woods is quite ready to jump into the Ronald Reagan miracle, but he has a taste of it because of course, the turning points of the story are that when he discovers that the rival knight of his city, that his friend, the hyperbolic man, likely died, passed away.
Right.
We don't know how yet.
Well, he talks to his aunt, right?
Yeah.
So can we go to that moment when he finds out about Mike's death? I think that's a good moment to read.
Yes.
Can you see here the screen says there was something funny about that woman?
Hi, this is Jed.
Would you mind reading a little bit?
I'm right here on my.
Yeah, just read as much as you want.
Yeah, Jed, a friend of Mike's from Colombia. I'd said I've been trying to reach Mike for 2 days. Who's this? This is Mike's aunt. There's something funny about the woman's voice. She hardly sounded like the sassy aunt who hauled Mike and his brother around half of Europe and North Africa. I've been calling Mike off and on for the last 2 days, and I keep getting a busy signal. Do you? The aunt cried out a plaintive warble. Mike is dead. That small, tearful voice far away in the swampy city of Memphis behind the impenetrable kudzu wall had a delayed effect. That's hyperbolic for you. Mike, with his wild blue eyes behind lame plastic aviator frames, the booming, crazy, mad scientist's laugh and shock of untamable hair. Mike convincing everybody he was dead. Then that warbling voice came back from behind the kudzu wall, strange and throbbing, to remind me of an uneasy situation at hand. Mike is dead. Can I talk to his dad or mother? The aunt told me it would be better to call later. So I left my condolences and number in New York.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. So,
so that leaves the problem, the dilemma, right? Where nightfall comes and this guy, the host in the Lexington Avenue walk-up, is about to go out on his date, and Jed is expelled to the streets.
But but here's the thing also, right as he finds out that he's dead, there's between the aunt saying Mike is dead the first time and the aunt saying Mike is dead a second time, there's a paragraph, which is a kind of breathing in sort of thing, like a kind of pause, right? And in that pause, which is this here, right? There's a lot, right? First of all, there's this sort of quasi comedic tone.
The reaction, yeah, like,
right?
oh, this.
That's hyperbolic for you, which is such a young man's reaction too, right? Like, that's one. But also there's something else, the kind of celebration of who he was, right? So there's like a kind of something.
Yeah, this wild, great spirit of this person. And
well, let me ask you just straightforwardly, what did you feel when the aunt told you that your friend was dead and you'd come to New York after a 4-year break?
I felt devastated and in a unfathomably devastated, in the sense that like how this happens at this time, this place, now. And as or Jed are seeking to live forward. And what had happened to me lent incredible, maybe just an amazement and a appreciation for life, and it's what some people would call coincidence.
Had you come to New York looking for Mike?
I had been I was going to visit him, and
But was that one of the main reasons why you went to New York? Was he one of the main reasons, or the character Jeb?
I would say he's a strong reason, and along with the other group of friends on the east side, and being able to revisit the Columbia neighborhood, Morningside Heights, and
so the return is kind of a little bit derailed, the idea that
just added a element that out of surprise, just a surprise element. I know for that the minute that happened, it cast everything. It accompanied me either the pondering of it, or just the amazingly weird circumstance wherever I went, and
also you don't know at the beginning, you don't know how he died, right? So there's this whole idea that you can't even, there's nothing to like hold on to, right? Like you say here, what if Mike took his own life? No way. AIDS, the rumor mill would have gotten that one. Overdose, unlikely. So this is an interesting part, because it's almost essayistic, right? In the sense that you're listing the possible causes of death, but also you're exposing a little bit about Mike and about yourself, because of the choice of possible deaths. Like there's some stuff that is just outright impossible, right? Stuff that's more likely.
Rejected on basis of character, and that it turned out, the sense of I'm thinking, if in reality I believe I did delay at least a while in hearing what happened to Mike, and have you ever had something like also where elements of other elements in life sometimes inform a piece of fiction?
Well, also that, yeah, and also time, because if you wrote it 10 years later, you had time to you had time to sit in your conscience, you know what I mean? It wasn't like a straight out reaction.
Yeah, unless a definite influence on this story was another case from somebody. He was a young guy representing his family who are settled here in south of downtown, and they were going to buy a property of the man I worked for here and managed rooming houses for,
right?
And he was. We had a certain transaction actually, and that carried on after I'd left to live in Guadalajara, right, for about a year, and
right.
Maybe 6 months into it, his sister, I think she had my mom's number, and my mom called and said, the sister's wants to take care of everything with you. Her brother died, and since communication in the 80s in Guadalajara and was certainly not the 24-hour global affair it is now, it left me many months before I came back to Los Angeles and visited the area south of downtown by the train tracks, where the daughter, who was a school teacher, and her parents lived. And I found out, after entertaining all kinds of ideas, what could have happened to him. And then I found out the truth of what it was. And they were picnicking or visiting by the Kern River, and his brother was drowning. His brother, he jumped to save his brother.
Right.
And he's the one who got dragged into the Kern River.
Which river?
It's there past the Ridge Route and into Kern County. It's a river with a lot of rapids.
Where is that? Sorry, I thought.
It's like you pass the ridge out, you go into the mouth of the San Joaquin Valley, and it's over. I think you go east, and it's a windy, curvy river that looks like a lot of fun, but it's been a menace for many rafters and people seeking recreation.
It's enough to shake you, right? Because it's somebody young, and I think there's something about that, about youth. When you lose somebody young, obviously all deaths are horrible, but in this case, going back to the story, right?
Yeah.
That kind of sends him over the edge, in the sense of like, he needs a drink now. I need a serious drink. I was proud of myself, though, as my hand reached for a bottle of Chivas, right? I reached over with the left and pulled the right hand slowly down. So there's that struggle there, the struggle of the bottle, right?
Yeah, and with one thumb and the other hand.
So it's like grabbing it and kind of slapping himself on the wrist or something, saying don't do that, right? And then we have a jump in time, right? A leap in time.
Yeah, this is after exhausting all other possibilities, and finally Thursday rolls around. It was the coxswain's big night, and I still hadn't lined up another place to crash, and I didn't know for sure whether I needed one. Everything depended on the red thumbtack. I sought refuge in the bar in the Plaza Hotel. I have always been drawn to this place. Outside the picture window, horse-drawn cabs and top-hatted drivers with frock coats glided past, the carriage wheels' spokes made invisible, and leafy, deep green shadows gathered over Central Park across the way. The waiter smirked when I asked for an iced tea. And by the way, the thing about the red thumbtack, it would be like on the doorway. If when I arrived back at the apartment on Lexington, if my friend there was still occupied on his date. So it was the red thumbtack agreement. And otherwise, for the duration of the evening, I was out wandering the city from East 78th Street to where the plaza is, and then back up the west side, like Broadway and Amsterdam Avenue. And it's a portrait of the city at that time changing, starting to gentrify on the west side notably, and still wonderful things from the past. I think.
So sorry, Grady. So one gets this feeling of like the character returning to New York and everything being slightly shifted or almost, destroyed a bit, weathered out or something, right? Like he drinks and calls his old girlfriend Valerie, right? So that first martini. So he has the martini. And then one more, right? No, he stopped.
That's quite enough to feel good.
Particularly if you haven't drank for a while, right?
No, I stopped. I stopped at one while my imagination ran off. Had to be strong. That's.
But he'd already had one, right? So there's that guilt there.
Yeah, or just that guilt, or that inebriation that comes with it. You know, that pleasant disorientation, and the feeling that maybe there's even more pleasant disorientation right around the corner.
Right, and he's already kind of disoriented, you know, in the sense of like, where's Valerie, right?
Where's Valerie?
Where's Mike?
Exactly where Mike is gone, and where's the old the Broadway that was kind of a little bit junky and trashy after getting up past Zabar's delicatessen and market. You know, it was turned into like Palm bars, and
that's something that I feel about New York, you know, and I've been there in that kind of psychological place. Like if you're in sync with the rhythm of it, it's great, you know, because you're going places, you're going to see a play or work or whatever, right? But the minute you find yourself out of step in New York, it's like the most sort of frantic feeling of it's just kind of a wave that's overtaking you, and you know, people are going places and you're not, you know?
You're maybe sinking under the wave.
Right, so it's like if you it's like a wave. If you surf it, you're great. It brings you to like heights, right? But if you don't surf it, then you sink. And it seems to me that you sank a little bit at that point, or the character who was you, particularly when, not particularly, but kind of almost being like the last straw, right? When he goes to the apartment and what is it? There's the red tag there, right?
Yeah,
Thumb tag.
Tag on the door, and that means spending more time out in like for waiting for passing the night.
Wadika is hanging out with his girlfriend or date.
Yeah, at the apartment.
Right, and so, how good a friend was he? Just curious.
We had good times and corresponded too over a period of years, and I would say a hearty fellow. You know, I'd like to see what happened to him. He's definitely not somebody who was like a close person for over a period of time, which, you know, those are the friends we have for life. Whereas he was a friend to that part of that New York period, and the
New York period, which in a way comes to an end here, no?
Well, it largely does, because my later trips have taken me to Queens and other boroughs principally.
There's an essay by Joan Didion, "Goodbye to All That," when she talks about just being done with New York, you know.
She apparently,
in her very particular prose.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
I'll send it to you. Yeah.
In life, apparently, she's had the change of heart, since I know she's quite ensconced in New York, and
even though she's from Sacramento.
But you know what? Probably that essay was right at the time when she and her husband came out and really did kind of.
Well, in the essay, she talks about, not being able to enjoy the things that seem so wonderful about New York anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I forget exactly the things that I read it like years ago, but she says something like, that person who used to uh, just surprise you and um, just kind of make you, you know, get you wide-eyed about their projects. Now it seems like such a cliche. Or, I've heard that project, like about that kind of project a million times, and just kind of things becoming not as exciting as they used to be, or not at all. So, she needs to go and find her own sense of excitement elsewhere. Now,
renew
what I
Yeah.
see a relationship with New York in this story here. Let me kind of pull it up here. And I'm just going to read a couple of lines, and then maybe you can comment on it. I crossed over to the west side via Central Park South and edged up Central Park West, scrupulously avoiding Broadway because it goes at an angle and would shorten my journey. My sole intent was to draw things out, just as I lingered over every sip of cold martini in the oak room. Treading up Central Park West, the foreboding turreted Dakota apartments came into view. One December 1980, we were watching TV in the dorm, and Mike Powers jumped up and bellowed, pointing to the TV. It's him, it's him. Earlier that afternoon, Mike had strolled past the Dakota, and an odd-looking fellow standing in front asked him for the time. It was John Lennon's attacker. So there's like a whole, I love the script, although there's more, right? I headed west to Amsterdam Avenue, a preserve of the old kitchen sink, New York. The avenue had certainly changed, though. Puerto Rican families sweaty loitering around front steps of tenements, ragamuffins playing stickball, and the longing desolation of the shirt-sleeve men with elbows on the upper story window sills as the women gossip and watch children from the stoop, all deleted and exchanged for sidewalk tables under scalloped awnings, and the well-groomed young trading glances over drinks. Okay, so it's kind of like a love song to the city in a way.
That's a really wonderful way to put it, because it's pervaded by this idea of this love song, and that's what some of the readers who've found. They think I have perhaps more fondness for New York, but that was always what drew me back to the story, is the pleasure of capturing these moments, these places that I knew them, and some, like that section of Broadway, it had changed and left it was bittersweet, but yeah, it's and that's what a love song is. A love song has it all. It can be joy, it can be revenge, it can be sweetness, all of these things. And that's I hope, well, just because it's in this literature, there's almost always an inherent pleasure in literature when we experience it through words and images, even if some of it's unpredictable and not so nice.
There's a very interesting line here at the beginning where you say, it's the beginning of that line, that first sentence. It goes at an angle and would shorten my journey, right? So the character avoids Broadway scrupulously because it goes at an angle and would shorten my journey. It's like this sense of like utter familiarity with the geography of the city.
Well, yeah, from maybe sense of, and I, during the election of 1980, I worked in the Harris opinion polls at like their office was 52nd Street. So I often would walk. It was a route I took home at night.
Why didn't you stay in New York?
Why didn't I?
Mm-hmm.
I got to kind of the middle of the second year of studies, and I knew my path was would be in art. I knew that profoundly, and when I got back for that last spring semester, it was it kind of gave it its that was the movement of that semester, because I knew that I would be heading back to California, and even spoke of Mexico then. And
to me, you're a Western writer. You're a Western American writer to the bone.
That's a really interesting, touches on a question I had reading your fresh novel, which is now in my hands, and
which is going to be published soonish. Yeah.
I will just say that readers of young and seasoned are going to be in for a vivid journey, a lively immersion into that just they will I think will be asking for more of when they get to the end of it. And you had some observations about Californians' exaggerated way of speaking, and I left those pages saying I can't wait to ask Patricio to explain a little bit about those exaggerated California. That's
probably something like character or mindset, you know?
Yeah, or one of your Alvo with Mamadou, I think.
Yeah.
He's the Beverly Hills tennis
right
player, and he feels like he's saying something in that
California. So one of the characters in my novel, his name is Mamadou Anderson. He's from Liberia, and he's taking a cross-country trip with an Ecuadorian, I guess we can call him Ecuadorian American, named Alvo Garzon. And so they're traveling, and somehow Mamadou, who's from Liberia, and therefore his ear is attuned, or he finds the novelties in American English, because he's an outsider. Then he hears, I think, Alvo, who's lived in California for a long time, enunciating words in a very California way, which is and he, the character Mamadou, feels that it is an exaggeration of cool, an exaggeration of like, it's okay, bro, it's okay, man.
Okay, there you go.
What's up? Hey, that kind of thing. And like a slight kind of tempo, it's off by a tempo. And when I lived in New York, when I lived on the East Coast, it felt like people talk so fast and so like aggressively almost, because having grown up here in California. And one thing, and also the other thing that I felt, I'm just saying this in parentheses as a kind of extra, was how East Coast centric the United States in its worldview is, and I felt it. I don't know how accurately, but I felt that because of the kind of cluster of cities that you have on the East Coast, and I'm sure people in the American South feel the same way and so in the South and in the Southwest or the West, Northwest, that the United States is very Northeast centric, but that goes a little bit beyond what you're asking. But anyway, so when I say that you're a very Western American writer, I mean that there's a little bit of, not so much in terms of the tonality of that the character was referring to, Mamadou, of that kind of exaggerated, cool or laid back attitude, but more so in the kind of in the bare bones possibilities of erecting a life. You know, like I'm just going to go out there and create a life of my own kind of thing. And I feel like that's present in your prose a lot. So when you're in New York, or the character is in New York, he feels like an alien, you know? But if he were alone and wandering on the, you know, anywhere west of Colorado, then he'd be okay.
That is deep reflection. Yeah, I feel there is a truth to that. And
so you didn't stay in New York, and then you like.
Yeah, I headed west after a detour in Los Angeles, and yeah, ultimately got back to Watsonville.
Imagine the difference between Watsonville or the El Valle del Pájaro, the Pájaro Valley, and the Big Apple, you know.
Yeah, that was. You've had your cross country trips for sure, and that one was a cross country Greyhound trip where I could stop at different places. So that was an opening up, and that was a renewal. Even if I passed through Ohio and never set foot on Ohio, I still felt like, oh gosh, I've been to yet another corner of the country. And
Graydon, would you mind moving a little bit to the left? Because yeah, there you go.
Good heavens.
Yeah. But you know, so I'm very familiar with like the migration story from outside of the United States into the United States, right? That's something that I've experienced myself and that I've seen all around with all kinds of immigrants who have all kinds of stories, right? And that how it feels to move into the core, the economic core of the world, right? To use these terms that I am using in my novel, right? I know how that feels, but there's something that I'm increasingly more interested in, and that would be the kind of migration stories, or not even migration, but just kind of moving within the United States, you know, like how it feels like to move from Memphis to Colombia, or from Watsonville, California to New York, or from Chicago to LA, you know, and like there's all these kind of movements that happen within the country, you know, and I find that also
people from Watsonville to Fresno, right? They
right.
Change a job, change a place, and
from Las Vegas to Reno or something to perform, you know.
Yeah. Definitely in my own family. I have a sister who's gone with her husband. They've been to Las Cruces, Indiana, Wisconsin, finally Reno and Winnemucca, and no plan to return permanently to California, but they keep coming closer, more westward all the time.
And then you know, 1 or 2 generations later, they move out of California because they can't afford it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's such an interesting kind of mythological trip in a way.
Yeah, we're a country on the move, and
you know, the same way in China, the Chinese people moved from the countryside to the cities. Those like great movements, you know.
Yeah, it's a vast difference. And here, where the expense of coastal California, that's fueling the diaspora to all these other places, and people love it. You know, you can get a mansion in Tallahassee. You know,
So we can read we can read this story. One of the keys could be like, why is it that Jeb does not stay in New York, or like the last trip before because like you never went back, right?
Yeah, he never went back. I went in the 90s. I made a trip back, but it was kind of the new territory because I went to Woodside, a Colombian neighborhood of Queens. And
right. So you weren't looking for that New York that was gone, that loss had already taken place.
Yeah, I think I spent one daytime, took the subway to Morningside Heights and walked around the campus and Broadway, and didn't, it wasn't nighttime, so I wasn't going to slip into the Marlin and see if there was anybody around I knew.
Right.
And went to Queens and saw some of my friends over there. And,
so let's go back to the story here. So let's see where we are here. Something about not having a winter coat. So his anti-drinking resolve melts, right?
Yeah, it definitely melts, and I'll bring you. Yeah, this is the part in the Marlin Cafe, running into those people who'd stayed and completed their degrees and kind of stayed in that same rail of life, and staying talking till closing time, and then it's.
Sorry, who are Matt and Michael here? Those are the friends who stayed in that.
Yeah.
That world.
Exactly. Yeah, they're inspired by some real people who are there, and perhaps I exaggerate, saying they were where I left them 4 years ago. They hadn't changed or moved an inch. Oh, Sans winter.
Oh, there you go. Right.
Yeah.
Because it takes place in the summer, right? The story.
Yeah. It takes place in July.
Right, late summer.
Yeah, and during the winter in the early '80s, there was a real vogue for just dark gray overcoats and kind of the existential, fashionably depressive character.
Well, it makes me think of like that movie, The Fly.
Yeah.
But anyway, there was a point here. So they hadn't moved an inch. But you had, and Mike had, right?
Yeah, Mike had gone from here to hereafter. And I note something too. They were the Marlin people. They weren't Mike's crowd at all. They weren't temperamentally like his. He was one of these people, a character, a bigger than life person, and the crowd here, they might be the grandchildren of the beat movement in a way.
Oh, that's who they were.
Yeah,
oh, then I probably misread it a little bit because I thought they were more like kind of preppy characters.
Yeah, I don't over describe it perhaps, but well, and they're ones who stayed and continue to study and
so what were the children of the beat movement doing at that point?
They were much more professionally focused, actually.
Professional beats.
So I'll say like preppy beats. And it meant they 4 years earlier, probably listened or to poetry and went to art galleries and maybe had arguments about Heidegger versus Jean-Paul Sartre,
Right.
and hung in the diner at nights too,
And they were
whereas now
blasé.
they were
They
much
were
more.
blasé when you told them about Mike's death.
Yeah, and that's understand. If you have it in around, it's blasé is not such a unusual human reaction, and
Yeah, that's
in
more
their
of a
milieu,
normal reaction in a way if you don't know.
yeah. Interestingly, in that milieu, it came up right away. Like somebody that I should have known, perhaps, and somebody said, had taken an overdose and committed suicide, and so that for them it was nothing to be shocked about. Here, plus a guy who wasn't known to them. Mike is not part of the artistic crowd in any way.
Also,
Much
something
more.
that I wanted to touch upon, and you can be as fictional or as personal as you want to be. Is the idea of, so the character or you doesn't want to have a drink, right? But suddenly, when the door opens, right, the bottles start coming, right? So the two cocktails turn into more beers and more, right? Including a counterfeit bill and all of that.
Thrown in, yeah. So yeah, it was, in a way, it was an extension of the idea to make the time go by and to get to the dawn. That's kind of that's Jed's motive in the story, and
Right. But also he seems to sort of let go, because he seems so uptight about not drinking, probably rightly so, but then once that door is broken, it's like, let him come.
That's a major shift. That's like not living by his vow, he's not living by his vow at that
And I
moment.
wonder if he'd stayed in New York, he would have gone down that
party way.
Well, because it's such a easy city to, well, I mean, I guess it's easy to drink hard anywhere, right?
No, but there it is. New York and Chicago compared to Los Angeles, where you have to drive a car around.
Right.
Instead, their neighborhood bars, it's much more integrated into life, and therefore available for those who would like to partake of it, and available for somebody who's maybe trying to let that go.
Right.
Yeah, it's a feature of hey, it's the local tavern.
What do you mean, or what does he mean when he says, and I felt ashamed playing the role of traveler, but after seeing these people for the first time in 4 years, I just couldn't bring myself to ask for a place to crash. I felt ashamed playing the role of traveler because he doesn't have his own place, right? And his own money.
Yeah, that even to me strikes me as a really curious, striking expression. Ashamed to play the traveler. And I'm thinking, that must have
looking for the Good Samaritan, right?
Yeah, and maybe not partly the needy traveler, and maybe a deeper reflection of my own dubiousness about people. Usually people who travel in the conventional fashion are those who most successfully avoid being instilled by essences of the culture and the place and the food and the rhythm and the life of the place they go to visit. It's usually back with the crowd and talk to your compatriots in the bus, and so I have kind of a skeptical view of the conventional tourist. And
where was Jeb coming from? Where had he been in those 4 years? And this is a little beyond, but
Memphis.
For 4 years?
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
Jed is, I've always seen as a Memphis boy.
Mm.
That's how I portray him. And now I'm like excited to get to see where he ends up on this journey. This Memphis.
It's interesting when you create a work of fiction, right? That's autobiographical, and rereading it, it's like you're encountering it. It's an encounter with yourself, but also with the character that you created.
Yeah, and all in these details that we're talking about, and the observations, his drinking problem, and then starting it again partly out of complacence, and also wanting to pass the night by.
There's some really nice observations here. Let me share this with you. And there's like poetry here. Whoever said New York never sleeps was a fool. The city not only slept, it was in a coma. And I was stuck here, the only sentient thing in a relentless landscape of stone, metal, glass, asphalt, and dog shit. Yeah, that juxtaposition of like the kind of poetry with the dog shit comment at the end. There's something kind of poignant there. And also the counterintuitive observation that New York does indeed sleep.
Yeah, it sleeps, as far as I can tell, very, very deeply, and a lot longer than Madrid, where the garbage trucks stir around 4 or 5 a.m., as I recall. And New York, it gets up kind of slow, except for a few, maybe some trucks thrown out the New York Times. And yeah, it was quiet right up to dawn.
All right, let's move on here.
He has an encounter with a
Leon.
A con guy. He's a genial kind of con guy, and the gist of that is, that he gets taken in, and Leon very quickly finds out Jed's need for a hotel or a place to stay.
Right.
And so they go through, this is 42nd Street as it was, signs of nudie shows, smells of popcorn and pine disinfectant, sidestepping the human wreckage on the sidewalk, indistinguishable from trash heaps till you saw movement. And there was a dim pair of eyes in the sooty face. I followed Leon around the corner, and he led me up some broken stairs. And this is where Leon's promise. He said, "Hey, you got that $5 bill. That's all you got. But I know a place where you can stay for $5. So he follows Leon up the stairs. Above, an empty, overlit hallway that reeked cigarette smoke and Lysol. Hushed voices, strange sounds issued from behind closed doors. Leon said he'd be right back and slipped around a fake wood-paneled corner. A few moments later, he returned, deposited a shiny key in my palm with a wink, and took my phony $5 bill in his hand. Actually, it's gone up. It's gone up in this edition to $20, everybody.
Inflation does impact the fiction.
It was a process. I remember we decided $5 was a little bit too small.
Mm.
So Leon, his parting word was room number 8. Well, the key did not fit room number 8. So I had to go down and rouse the Rastafarian desk clerk to ask where my room was.
Mm.
He snored awake, and without any transition from sleep to wakefulness, fended off my inquiries in a language of scowls, shrieks, and finger jabs, and then lay his head back on the counter and snored. I'd been had, so had Leon.
So there's there's this bunch of little stories in the greater story, right?
Yeah, you're right. These little like vignettes.
Mm.
It's
Vignettes of a Somnambulist.
that's right. I like that title. That's a very excellent title.
Mm. But you called it Angels.
I do,
which is evocative too. Pointed, just one word.
That brings me, well, actually, right, the place where we are, and it's going past Madison Square Garden, Union Square, and finally, the wet, cool breeze augured a new day. In the confused, mazy streets by the village, I get turned around and somehow end up at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge.
Huh.
The East River glistened darkly against the shore lights. I breathed in salt air from the Atlantic and felt a breeze against my face. The author of Look Homeward, Angel, used to come here to the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge after long bouts of writing on top of his refrigerator. He was Thomas Wolfe. He was a tall guy, so he could write, use the top of a refrigerator for his desk.
Wow, must have been really tall, or the refrigerator must have been
3 or 4, something like that. And so he looked during the wee hours to gaze from the bridge over the dark waters and rest his eyes and weary soul. There was a presence, a halo about this place. Well, Thomas, it's been quite a night, I said. What, somebody talking to me? A voice grumbled from the river. Yes, I uttered in dumb amazement. Thanks for remembering me. College professors don't like me much nowadays. All the empurpled prose and superlatives don't set well with them. Yankee professors. What really peeves me is how often I get confused with the other Wolf, the priggish fellow who wears the white suit.
You know, the funny thing here, Grady, also is that Tom Wolfe is such a Western writer, right? So, isn't he?
Well, I know he definitely depicted the adventures of Ken Kesey and also Hunter Thompson in the 60s, the electric acid Kool-Aid test. And
well, no, but I'm not talking. I'm talking about the Thomas Wolfe, not the one you're talking about in the story, not the one in the white suit.
Oh, the one I'm talking about. He came from Asheville, North Carolina. He
spent a lot of time in the wild, right, and stuff like that.
Well, actually, no. He's probably as close to a novel, in many ways, to a novel writer as Walt, with that spirit of Walt Whitman, because he wanted to travel, know it deeply. He got, from Asheville. He ends up studying drama writing at Harvard, and finally comes to the New School for Social Research. But he's writing away, and he has a novel about his family and local characters and his area of Asheville.
But he's not accepted by the professors, right? As much anymore.
Anymore is exactly right. He's
so in a way, he's ejected from the by the glitterati,
True, and that brings up a real interesting question about.
And in a way, just to finish my thought, you leave, and because it seems to me that no wonder how beautiful and how stimulating the city might be. At the end, you gotta have a place that you can call home, and that's not for Jeb, right? And that's not his home, and on top of that, his friend is dead. That's my interpretation, anyway.
Those aren't things that are thought out, but when I hear you speak of it, I say, wow.
Like Borges said, there's no reason why the writer has the last word in the story.
Yeah, the writer's maybe just the start of a conversation.
Right.
And then it spawns many more if you're lucky.
Yeah.
We
all right, so let's kind of pick up a little bit of the momentum here, and what goes on with Sheila then?
That is where a lot of momentum picks up. Day dawns over Central Park South,
right,
and we got the apartment. I cannot get back to Lexington Avenue yet, and
so what is she? A prostitute?
Yeah, she is. She's a beautiful prostitute.
A woman of the night.
Yeah, or I just say, girl of the night, and a chilly breeze of the coming days stirred the leaves of Central Park and stirred her semi-transparent skirt. And on the verge of passing her by, I saw a tear run down her face. I turned and looked at her. Looks like you had a rough night, she said in a Jersey slur. I've been out all night. I didn't have anywhere to stay. You could stay with me, she said. Sheila, I haven't got a cent. What's your name? Sheila. Why do you think I spent all night walking? What about your watch? It's a nice watch. Maybe we could make a deal and exchange your watch for, thanks anyway, but I'd like to know what time it is. And you know what? She spoke the truth when she said, I have a room where we can go. It won't be. And they go.
They go to Wadika's place, correct?
That's the by then it's open, it's available, and that's exactly.
It's available. Well, it wasn't a motel, right?
Yeah.
It was his apartment.
It almost,
but that's how Jeb looked at it. Yeah.
Yeah. The minute my host and a tall, bony young woman bound from the doorway went into the street, Sheila and I ensconced ourselves in a nearby doorway and waited for the former coxswain of the Trinity rowing team to disappear down a subway entrance. And we trudged upstairs and began to unzip her dress and massage her nipples. a phone ringing interrupted us. Anyway, that's, yeah, yet it's another passage.
You leave us with a very kind of titillating ending, or we end the reading at this titillating point, right? All right. So it seems like, how many adventures can he get into until he collapses, you know?
It's almost the point.
Right.
The mystery of Mike's death is cleared up.
Right.
Sheila leaves with Jed's watch that morning from the apartment on Lexington. And
which is more, it leaves him even more in a kind of twilight zone, because now he doesn't even know what time it is.
Yeah, he'll have to look at the Grand Central Station or Times Square and get the time. I'm looking at a line of one of Sheila's lines. She said, "Nobody important in my life has died. I've got my Grammy and Grandpa. There was a hamster once that got out of its cage. My brother rolled over it and smothered it while he was sleeping. That's awful." And she said that, "Jed, you're here for a reason. God chose to put you here in this time and place." And it's a moment of coping. A big component of the story is about death, and it's about what happens when the people we love or who create ire in us are suddenly hollow, and they will not surprise us anymore with what they do or say. We will not feel their warmth, and here's Sheila, who says she really hasn't had that happen in her life.
Right.
And yet she's giving Jed the comfort that.
But you know what I also feel like, on top of it being a story about death, because it's not a story that's mostly like a eulogy or a sad story of loss. As I read it, I don't feel that. I feel a story of adventures in New York, with death as a kind of fuel to do that last little trip, or maybe that.
Even it's a little spice. I would say death is almost like the pepper, the pepper.
The pepper, right? That frames life.
Yeah.
But the story's full of life. It's, and I wonder also where, like, I'm reading a story about the writer Graydon Miller would have been if he had been a New York writer. Like, if you had stayed at Columbia and just stayed in New York and built a life there, that seems so unlikely now, but let's say that it would have happened. Maybe a lot of your stories wouldn't take place, as your novels say, Veracruz, Havana, Mexico, the Central Coast, agricultural coast of California, but your stories, you would be a Manhattan writer, So like, in a way, in both tone and theme, I feel like this is a story of, like, New York doesn't come up that much in your writing. Like, that's,
this is the manifestation of it. And
then I see your fiction goes off in different directions, right? Because you have very, like, that kind of hard-boiled part of it is there. The kind of human relationships are there. The drama of human relationships. But that urban description of the city, not so much. When I think of your fiction, I think of, like, say, A Winter in Hell, which is a description of coastal California.
Yeah, it's
so I don't know, I find it kind of wonderful as I kind of exercise in like imaginations and thinking like where you would have gone as a writer if you had lived in New York all your life, as opposed to California.
Yeah, I can reflect on that. Really interesting too. And when I consider this particular story came up with me after a long time, a good decade had passed before it kind of crystallized and kind of a nostalgic yearning. And so this is the chrysalis for this long story, long loving New York story. And also because of my early stories about and inspired in a period in Memphis, and I almost fell into that Southern slot, and ultimately branched out to the winter and hell and the California coast, the Monterey Bay, where very much a story of rebellion and against kind of North American convention and expectations.
When did you move to Mexico?
I first traveled there for a year in the
when did you start your 10-year stint in Mexico?
That was in early 90s, like 90 February of 92.
And then you come back with like Spanish, you know what I mean? So, I mean, that's interesting from a biographical perspective. The late 80s, you're coming back to New York, and then early 90s, you're moving to Guadalajara, Mexico, to live there for 10 years and come back as a kind of bilingual writer,
I got to soak it up and was so lucky to be working in the translation department at the University of Guadalajara. So I was working with a woman there who was, who handles these rare and arcane and frequent questions the lovers of language have with knowledge and pleasure,
But the point is that where your life would have gone if you had stayed in New York, because you didn't, and then your life went somewhere else, So maybe this is like your way of saying goodbye to the city, or like had Mike Powers been alive,
It might have been different, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know, it's just kind of some thoughts on that.
It's really intriguing because I always love these ideas of lives going in a different direction.
Right.
Like just if people they didn't live or terminate their lives, did not terminate, and they suddenly inhabited a future. What would have happened? We'll say if Hemingway had lived until 1968, right?
Right.
It would have infiltrated a different time, and it might have changed. Well, of course, I think by nature, I think you change a molecule of time and life, and you change maybe air.
But you're a particularly geographic writer, I think. I mean, in many ways, right?
Yeah, I maybe that means I have to settle in a part of the world, or maybe it can be just a brief stay, like this the Mexican writer from Jalisco. Somebody said, "How long did you live in that place?" Yeah, well, it was a 30-minute bus stop where I observed the village and later wrote a story about it.
Well, I know you will have your library in Watsonville, California one day, the Graydon Miller branch. I predict that, but we're talking about in the future. But let's go back to Mike Powers, right? And then he goes to the funeral.
That's really, that's to me the pivotal moment in the story of Angels. And so when he's with Sheila, he got a call from Mike Power's parents saying, you're Mike's friend, and you just happened to be in Colombia at this time when he died. So come up to the chapel, St. Paul's in the campus. We're going to have a memorial for Mike, and we'd like you to speak. So Sheila left wearing my wristwatch. After a sweaty nap, I put on a shirt retrieved from the floor and took a cab to Morningside Heights. Standing before the gathering of friends and family in St. Paul's Chapel, furiously fanning themselves in the heat, I was infused by new energy. Sheila was right. There was a reason for my being here. Talking to Mike's parents afterwards and sharing their grief, I learned how Mike died. And we spoke of that earlier. Yeah, he had a month's training in Abu Dhabi on the Persian Gulf, and then later, this very sultry July night in New York, he comes home and is asphyxiates and has a fatal asthma attack. And
so he had served in the military?
No, business actually.
Business, okay.
Yeah, he was. It was a major. It's called the Bank of Commerce and Credit International, and but later got embroiled in scandal, which was hyperbolically. We all agreed that Mike much better ending would have been that the bank got to him because he knew too much.
Right.
That was the alternate hyperbolic ending.
Right. So you're kind of doing the hyperbolic justice to him.
Yeah. The coda there's a long coda after Jed goes to California.
So what do you mean by I solved the riddle of Mike's death? That's the hyperbolic ending that you're telling me about?
Exactly, yeah. The hyperbolic ending. And
then he goes back to California, or you go back to California.
Yeah, I call it a fresh, after the memorial service, I say he headed out of Dodge and headed west to California in a fresh start. And then we get to the final passages.
Right.
Where, it's a little perhaps unexpected, but he's in like a 12-step home in
right.
Los Angeles with a very fragmented view of the Hollywood sign, and a group of beautiful and damaged souls there who share this facility. And he reflects on it. And
would you mind reading the last two paragraphs? If I squint hard from the bungalow.
Yeah, if I squint hard from the bungalow porch, I can barely make out the white individual letters spelling Hollywood through the tawny layers of smog. W, capital O, visible in a gap between raggedy palms and the stucco top of Sunset Lanai Apartments. At times, the goofy sign appears tantalizingly close, and other times so impossibly far, as the hills rearrange themselves in different baffling topographies. A couple blocks can make the difference between what seems a short stroll away and something forbiddingly remote as the summit of Kilimanjaro. Yet the sign is always there, playing hide and seek with we groundlings. We are all seekers until we stop seeking, and my heels seek the top of the letter H, and when I reach it, the hyperbolic man will be there waiting. What took you so long? He'll exclaim with a sheet-eating grin from ear to ear. Emil and Honey will be tap dancing on that tinsel Olympus, and Alberto will be slumped over in a beer buzz. And Sheila, Leon, and Thomas Wolfe will be there too, making Dixieland jazz and fanning their sweaty faces with their own enormous feathered wings. Angels, all of us.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
My deep pleasure.
I have one last question for you before we could go on forever, but we're gonna keep it short at like 2 hours, I think, or over an hour and a half.
Wow.
I think, right? What time do we start? Maybe not that long.
It feels like we outdid ourselves yet again.
Right. So my question to you is this: what are the benefits and the trappings of autobiographical short story writing? Because I'm sure there are both.
Being able to mold things from these chunks of experience that perhaps don't. It's like mining for gold. There's a lot of rock and dirt, and then but if you keep at it, you can reach the narrative nuggets, and eventually the fiction process begins, the coalescing and the articulating characters and dialogue springs sometimes out of nowhere, almost nowhere. And
I think also, like, fiction gives you a ready-made plot with a ready-made conflict, because life is a conflict, eternal conflict, and life is a plot. You know what I mean? So any slice of life is a plot already.
Yeah, in the tiniest slice, you're gonna have all of those mixed, clashing agendas, needs, distress, struggle. Struggle's at the heart of it,
and maybe that's part of the kind of shortcoming too, or not shortcoming, the trapping or the difficulties of potential difficulties of autobiographical writing. I know it all too well, that like it could drag you into a zone of detail that's more evocative for you as a writer
than
for the reader. But you do a good job at staying away from that.
And also, to me, it's freeing to tackle more fantastic themes too, and that imagine things like that take me to new places, like such as Veracruz, or more recently novella that ends up 45 years in the future, and imagining what I never thought I'd be, placing me in a world and trying to populate it and detail it. It has the great fun benefit of having been non-premeditated almost.
Right. Yeah, and it allows for the subconscious to flow. All right. Graydon Miller, the one and only author of the Havana Brotherhood. Here we are. A collection of short stories about which T.C. Boyle himself has said it is a wonderful masterful work, masterful. T.C. Boyle, and I say it myself. Okay, so I want everybody to go out and check it out. Collection of 11 stories, the Havana Brotherhood. Not all of them autobiographical, but a lot of them with that same power. And then there's the Spanish novel Mujeres con Navajas, which is tour de force. Okay, so both of them available on Amazon. And thank you, Graydon, and we'll talk again soon.
Patricio, and we've got a new one coming up, and we will be chatting soon about
with Juan David Castilla, who's going to be with us.
Joining us.
And we'll be reading The Red-Headed League. So if anybody wants to read ahead, we're going to talk about it at length. And as always here, like focusing on the actual stories, you know, with very pointed and focused reading. So, all right. I'm Patricio Maya, and this is Graydon Miller. Take care.
Thank you, Patricio.
Thank you, Grady.